I never expected my life to change the way it did. When I first met Father Gabriel, I didn't think much of it. He was just another priest, another man in a collar who seemed kind, thoughtful, and distant. I had never been particularly religious, but there was something about his presence that called to me, something that stirred something deep inside of me, even before I understood what it meant. At first, it was the sermons. He had a way of speaking that was so raw and real, unlike anything I'd heard in church before. His words didn't just fill the room, they settled into my soul. When he preached, he didn't just speak of faith. He spoke of doubt, of struggle, of redemption. I found myself listening more intently than I ever had, captivated by the way he seemed to understand the complexities of life that most people shied away from. I would stay after Mass, trying to find moments to talk to him, not about religion, but about life. There was always a quiet understanding in his eyes, like he could see straight through me. Every conversation was a balm for my restless heart, even if I couldn't always articulate why. It wasn't long before I found myself at his doorstep one evening, unexpectedly standing in front of him with a question I hadn't even planned on asking. "Father Gabriel, could we talk?" I asked hesitantly, my voice faltering a bit as I spoke. He smiled softly, as if he had been expecting me. "Of course, come in." We sat across from each other, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. There was something comforting about his office, despite its simplicity. Books lined the shelves, and the faint scent of incense lingered in the air, a perfect blend of warmth and holiness. But it wasn't the room that drew me in, it was him. "I don't know what I'm doing," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. "I've always struggled with faith, with purpose. But when I hear you speak, I feel like I might be able to find something real." Father Gabriel looked at me, his expression soft, thoughtful. "Faith isn't always about certainty. Sometimes, it's about the search. The questions are part of the process. What do you feel when you listen?" I paused, searching for the right words. "Hope. Maybe more than hope. It's like I've been walking in the dark for so long, and suddenly, there's light. Even if it's faint, it's enough." He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. "That's the beginning of something beautiful." For the next few months, our conversations became more frequent, more personal. Each one left me feeling more seen, more understood, and yet, more confused. My feelings for him were growing, more than just admiration or respect. There was something deeper, something that I couldn't quite grasp but couldn't ignore either. We spoke about God, about life, about love. We spoke about doubt, and through it all, I could see how deeply he struggled with his own feelings. I knew instinctively that Father Gabriel wasn't just the priest I had come to rely on. He was a man with his own vulnerabilities, his own pain. And that was when it happened. One evening, as we were sitting together, a silence fell between us. It was comfortable, but it was also charged, filled with an unspoken energy. I felt it before he did, the slight tension in the air, the way his gaze flickered to mine, then away. The vulnerability between us was palpable, thick with something neither of us was prepared to name. "Father," I said softly, almost unsure of my own words, "do you ever wonder if it's possible to be more than what we're told we should be?" He didn't answer right away, his brow furrowing slightly. "More than what?" "More than just what people expect," I said, leaning in slightly. "More than just your role as a priest." I don't know if I'm making sense." His silence stretched longer, and then finally he spoke, his voice low and measured. "Sometimes, I wonder if I'm living someone else's life. But I've taken an oath," and he stopped himself, his eyes meeting mine. There was a rawness in them that made my heart race. "But I don't know if I can live in a way that's true to myself without losing everything." I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. "You don't have to lose anything. You don't have to be anything other than who you are." His breath hitched slightly, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his carefully constructed facade. "What if who I am isn't enough?" "I think you're more than enough." That night, the air between us was electric, almost unbearable. I could feel the distance between us closing with every breath. It wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a confession. The words we hadn't said, the feelings we had buried, were suddenly on the surface. And as I looked at him, I realized I wasn't just seeking answers from Father Gabriel anymore. I was seeking him. I wanted him, not in a simple, fleeting way, but in a way that went deeper than either of us had anticipated. He stood, his movements slow, deliberate, like he was trying to process something too large to grasp. "I can't," he whispered, almost to himself. I stood as well, my heart pounding in my chest. "You don't have to, Father. You don't have to fight this. I'm not asking for anything from you that you don't want. But please, just don't pretend you don't feel what I feel." His eyes searched mine, something broken in them, something yearning. "You don't know what you're asking." "I do," I said, stepping closer to him. "I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to be real with me." And then, in a moment of raw, unguarded honesty, he stepped closer, the distance between us dissolving as his hands lifted to my face. They trembled slightly, a hesitation born of conflict and longing, but the warmth of his touch sent a shiver through me. His thumbs brushed gently against my skin as if he were memorizing every curve and angle. His lips hovered over mine, so close I could feel the faint tremble of his breath, before they brushed against mine with a softness that felt both tentative and reverent, testing the waters of an unspoken desire. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Instead, I leaned into him, my lips answering his with a fervent, unspoken truth. The kiss deepened, no longer cautious but searching, desperate to convey everything words had failed to express. It wasn't just about the heat or the passion. It was about the solace we found in each other. In that moment, every fear, every expectation, every rule faded away, leaving only the raw, unvarnished essence of who we truly were. We weren't priest and sinner. We weren't bound by titles or expectations. We were just two souls, stripped of the roles the world had cast upon us, bearing our hearts in a way that felt terrifyingly real. When the kiss finally broke, it wasn't from reluctance but necessity. We stood there, breathless and trembling, our foreheads leaning together as though the closeness could anchor us in the whirlwind of emotions threatening to drown us. His eyes, stormy and full of regret, locked onto mine as he whispered, his voice hoarse and laden with guilt, "I shouldn't have done that." I shook my head, my voice soft but unwavering. "No. We both needed this." He stepped back, as if the space might quell the storm raging within him, but the pain and conflict in his eyes remained. He gazed on the floor, then back to me, searching for answers neither of us had. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Neither do I murmured, the weight of uncertainty heavy between us. "But maybe we don't need all the answers right now. Maybe we'll figure it out, one step at a time." For a moment, silence hung between us, thick with all the words left unsaid and the emotions neither of us fully understood. Yet even in the uncertainty, there was an unspoken promise, fragile but real, that we would face whatever came next, together. Father Gabriel and I began to spend more time together, in small, fleeting moments where the world seemed to disappear. After Mass, we would sit in his office, the quiet hum of the church surrounding us. His voice, always steady and calm, became a source of comfort, but the moments when he would look at me, a glance filled with unspoken words, those moments left me breathless. One afternoon, as the sun cast soft light through the stained glass windows, I found myself sitting across from him, my heart racing. He was speaking of faith, but his words felt distant, as if he were speaking more to himself than to me. "Do you ever wonder, Father," I began, my voice quieter than usual, "if love is something we're all afraid of?" He turned his gaze toward me, his expression soft but uncertain. There was a vulnerability in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Afraid of it," he repeated softly. "Love can be many things, beautiful, painful, all-consuming. But yes, sometimes I think I am afraid of it." "Why?" I asked, leaning forward, my eyes locked on his. His breath caught for a moment, and he looked away, as if struggling to find the words. "Because it can change everything. Can make you question everything you've built, everything you believe. And I've worked so hard to build something solid, something unshakable. I can't afford to let it all fall apart." I felt a pang in my chest at his words. There was so much fear in him, so much uncertainty, and it mirrored the turmoil within me. The feelings I had for him weren't just fleeting, they were real, and they were terrifying. "I don't want to break anything," I whispered, almost to myself. "But I can't stop what I'm feeling either." Father Gabriel's eyes softened as he reached across the table, his hand trembling slightly as he brushed against mine. The touch was gentle, but it carried so much weight. I could feel his heart beating just as quickly as mine. We sat like that for a long moment, silently acknowledging the unspoken bond between us. Finally he spoke, his voice low and strained. "I don't know if I can be the man you need me to be. I'm a priest, and I've taken vows. I've dedicated my life to something higher. I don't need you to be perfect," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. "I just need you to be real with me." He stared at me for a long time, as though weighing my words carefully. Then, without another word, he stood up, his hands shaking slightly. He walked to the window, his back to me, and I could feel the tension between us growing with every passing second. "I don't know what to do with these feelings," he confessed, his voice breaking slightly. "I never expected this. I never thought I'd be in a position where my faith and my heart would be at odds." I stood as well, walking toward him, closing the gap between us. When I reached him, I placed my hand gently on his shoulder. "You don't have to do anything," I whispered. "We don't have to have all the answers. But I think we can figure this out together." He turned to face me then, his eyes searching mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something deep and undeniable, in his gaze. His lips parted as though he was about to say something, but instead, he closed the space between us, his hands cupping my face with a tenderness that sent shivers down my spine. "I've never felt like this before," he murmured, his forehead resting against mine. "I don't know if I can do this." "You don't have to," I whispered back. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." And then, in that moment, everything shifted. The world outside seemed to fall away, and all that remained was the quiet intensity between us. Without saying another word, he kissed me, gently at first, as if testing the waters, but I kissed him back, pulling him closer, letting the kiss deepen. It wasn't just passion, it was a surrender, an acknowledgement of the bond we had formed, and the connection we could no longer deny. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathless, he looked at me, his eyes wide and filled with a mixture of wonder and fear. "I don't know where this will go," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't either," I replied softly. "But I'm willing to find out." Afterwards, we found ourselves caught in a web of emotions that neither of us could easily untangle. The kiss we shared had opened something between us, something we both wanted but were afraid to embrace fully. Every glance we exchanged, every conversation, seemed to hold an underlying tension, a pull that neither of us could resist. Yet we both knew the risks. We were standing on the edge of something dangerous, something that could tear us apart. Father Gabriel's role as a priest was something that couldn't easily be shaken. It was his life, his calling, and it was everything he had built his identity around. And me? I was just someone who had stumbled into his life, someone whose feelings had become too complicated to ignore. We met again one evening, in the quiet of his office. The tension was there, neither of us sure of what to say, but both of us needed to say something. Father Gabriel sat at his desk, his hands folded in front of him, his gaze distant. I could see the internal struggle on his face. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You haven't," I replied, walking toward him. "But I need you to understand. I can't pretend like this isn't real. What we have, it's real." "I know," he admitted, his voice breaking. "But I'm not just a man. I'm a priest, and I've made vows. I can't break them, not even for you." I reached out, placing my hand on his. "I don't want you to break anything for me. I just want you to be honest with yourself." He closed his eyes, his lips trembling as he whispered, "I don't know how to do that." "You don't have to know," I said softly. "But we can take it one step at a time. We don't have to have all the answers." Father Gabriel's eyes opened slowly, meeting mine with a mix of fear and something deeper. "What if I'm not strong enough to face this? To face what I'm feeling?" "You're stronger than you think," I said, my voice full of conviction. "And we're in this together." With that, he leaned in once more, his lips finding mine in a kiss that spoke of everything we couldn't say. It was gentle, but there was a fire behind it, a promise that despite everything standing in our way, we would find a way to navigate this together. and in that moment as our lips parted, I knew one thing for certain. We had crossed a line that couldn't be undone.
Hey there. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and subscribe to help us grow and keep sharing amazing content with you. And feel free to explore our other videos, we've got so much more epicness waiting for you. Thank you for being part of our journey, you're the real MVPs.